The Vrakan Council declared Arya Chen dead on the 43rd cycle after the Avalanche. It was protocol no human could survive that long in the frozen wasteland of Theta Prime's northern continent, especially not buried beneath 30 meters of ice and permafrost. The search teams had given up after the first week. The orbital scanners showed nothing. The thermal signatures had vanished. Commander Ziegler himself had signed the death certificate, his 4 eyes dim with what passed for sorrow among his kind. The human showed bravery, he'd announced to the assembled colony. She gave her life attempting to save the Vrakan cubs from the Avalanche. Her sacrifice will be remembered. The memorial service was brief. Humans didn't warrant elaborate ceremonies on Theta Prime. They were workers. Technicians, the small and fragile species that the Galactic Union had deemed suitable for hazardous colonial work. Arya had been one of 47 humans on the ice world, maintaining the thermal extraction facilities that powered the Vrakan settlement. She'd been expendable. Replaceable. They'd already posted her position on the job boards. But the Vrakan didn't understand humans. Not really. They didn't understand the peculiar chemistry that kept human blood flowing even when logic said it should freeze. They didn't understand the stubborn inefficiency of human metabolism, the way it burned hot and desperate even in the face of impossible cold. And they certainly didn't understand what a human would do, what a human could do when small lives depended on them. When the spring thaw came to Theta Prime's northern regions, it came slowly. The sun, a pale, distant thing, finally climbed high enough to begin its work. The massive ice sheets that had crushed the mountainside began their grudging retreat. Meltwater carved new rivers through ancient stone. It was a Vrakan geological survey team that found her. They'd been mapping the newly exposed terrain, cataloging mineral deposits and structural damage, when their scanner picked up an anomaly. Heat. Faint, but unmistakable. Organic. Impossible. The team leader, a young Vrakan named Shalter, thought the scanner was malfunctioning. Nothing could be alive under there. The avalanche had happened 97 cycles ago. The human had been declared dead for 54 cycles. This was a ghost reading, a glitch. But protocol demanded investigation. They found her in a small cave, barely larger than a supply closet. The avalanche had created it by chance, a pocket, where 3 massive boulders had jammed together, creating a tiny void before the snow had filled in around them. The entrance was sealed with ice a meter thick. It took them 2 hours to cut through. When they finally breached the seal, what they found defied every biological principle the Vrakan understood. Arya Chen was alive, barely. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as the ice around her. Her heartbeat was so faint that their medical scanners almost missed it. She was in the deepest possible state of hypothermic torpor, her body having slowed itself to the barest edge of survival. But she was breathing. And curled against her chest, wrapped in the shredded remains of her thermal suit, were 2 small forms. The Vrakan cubs. Fen and his sister, the young ones who had been playing on the mountainside when the avalanche struck. They were warm, active. Their vital signs were strong. Shelter stood frozen, staring at the impossible scene. The humans should have been dead within hours. The cubs should have frozen within minutes. But somehow, impossibly, she had kept them alive. The medical team arrived within minutes of the emergency call. As they carefully extracted Arya from the cave, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. The shredded thermal suit hadn't just been torn by the avalanche, she had deliberately destroyed it, wrapping every scrap of insulation around the cubs. Her own body heat, trapped in that tiny space, had created a microclimate just warm enough to sustain them. But that wasn't the most remarkable part. The human's emergency pack had contained 27 nutrient bars, standard issue for survey work. Enough to keep 1 person alive for perhaps 15 cycles if rationed carefully. They found 26 empty wrappers arranged neatly in the corner of the cave. The 27th bar was partially consumed. Bite marks showed it had been broken into pieces and fed to the cubs. Arya had given them everything, every calorie, every gram of insulation, every degree of her own body heat. She had kept them pressed against her chest for 97 cycles. Singing to them, Shalter would later find the words scratched into the cave wall, human lullabies transcribed in shaking letters. She had fed them, warmed them, kept them calm in the absolute darkness. And when her body had finally exhausted every resource, when she should have died, she had done something no Vrakan biologist could fully explain. She had simply refused. Her metabolism had crashed into a state that shouldn't have been survivable, hovering at the edge of death but never crossing it. Her consciousness had fled, but some deep, primitive part of her brain had kept her alive, kept her heart beating, kept her body warm enough to sustain the small lives depending on her. The cubs Fen and his sister wouldn't leave her side in the medical bay. They clung to her unconscious form, chittering in distress whenever anyone tried to separate them. The Vrakan doctors had never seen anything like the bond that had formed in that dark cave. The cubs had imprinted on her completely. It took 6 cycles for Arya to wake up. When she did, her first words were, "The cubs?" "Safe," the medical officer told her. His voice filled with an emotion that didn't translate well into human language. Something between awe and fear. "Because of you." Commander Ziegler came to see her on the 8th cycle. He stood at the foot of her bed for a long time, all 4 eyes fixed on her gaunt face. The cubs were curled beside her, finally sleeping peacefully. "We didn't think it was possible," he said finally. "No species in the Galactic Union could have survived what you survived. Done what you did." Arya looked down at Fen, her hand resting gently on his small head. "They were babies," she said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps the commander thought for humans it did. The memorial plaque with Arya's name was quietly removed. A new one was erected in the colony's central plaza, not a memorial, but a monument. The Vrakan had a word for it in their language, a concept that didn't quite translate to any human tongue. The closest approximation was testament to impossible will. Beneath Arya's name, they carved a simple phrase in both Vrakan and English. She refused to let them die. So death refused to take her. The colony's human workers found their contracts substantially improved after that. Better quarters. Better pay. And a new clause that puzzled many of them. Humans may not be deemed expendable under any circumstances. When asked why, Commander Ziegler would simply gesture to the monument and say nothing. But in the private councils of the Vrakan leadership, a new understanding had taken root. They had thought they understood humans, weak, small, illogical creatures suited only for dangerous work. They had been catastrophically wrong. Humans, they now understood, were something far more terrifying than strong or logical. Humans were stubborn. Humans were relentless. And when properly motivated, humans could look at impossible odds and simply refuse to accept them. The Galactic Union would need to reconsider many things, starting with who, exactly, they considered expendable.